Some mornings you wake up and there's just so much to process. A lot's going to fall through the sieve, but I don't know. Maybe not more so than a day like today.
Yeah, it's a bit busy day. I thought perhaps it was infrastructure week. We have so much else going on. That's usually when all the crazy stuff happens. I do see some connections between these things, though. This Cohen testimony, it's sort of the worse that testimony is, and the worse sort of the politics around that is. I think it's the better for the one sort of market event people are really thinking about, which is this trade deal. I think the worse things are at home, the more likelihood we're going to get some sort of trade deal. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions for Lighthizer about this trade deal. And in particular, what is the administration going to do to enforce any sort of restrictions on China or anything China agrees to regarding intellectual property, tech transfer, subsidies to business, because that is the key issue. Because if they strike a deal and it's just about a bunch of promises from China, and then if there's disagreements, they're going to have more talks, neither Democrats nor Republicans are going to take well to that.
Do you see Lighthizer, Tom, as the key? I mean, amid all of this, on a relative basis for the markets?
Yeah. I mean, for the markets, clearly the Fed pivot's probably the most important thing that's happened in the past 6 months, and really going to govern how the rest of the year plays out. But a trade deal is obviously critical because it's going to set corporate profitability on a new track, give us some visibility, and then sort of reinforce fundamentals. So it's important.
Jimmy, what do you think in terms of the daylight potentially that's between Lighthizer and Trump, and whether or not the president may settle for a deal that many of his supporters on the China issue would not be happy to see?
Listen, I think that's a big concern. It's been a big concern among China hawks in the White House. It's been a big concern among China hawks in Congress. That ultimately, at the end of the day, that Trump is going to be for what Trump has said he's for 30 or 40 years, that he wants a smaller trade deficit. That's what he's focused on. When he speaks extemporaneously, he focuses on a deal where China buys more stuff. He does not talk as much about all this other stuff as far as the Chinese economic model. The very thing the China hawks are most concerned about. That description that you gave, how Lighthizer talks about the U.S.-China relationship, a deal which involves China buying more sorghum does not at all get that deal. And that really opens up critics on the president's trade policy, particularly on the right, people who still might want to run for president but are looking to put some daylight between themselves and Trump, like Marco Rubio, Tom Cotton. That could give them something to talk about.
We did get December trade deficit at a record, Tom, $79 billion. Does that play at all here? I mean, do we still believe the president's priorities are things like a trade deficit or a currency instead of IP and so forth, tech transfer?
Well, I think it's kind of both, but clearly the most important things for the U.S. would be protection on intellectual property and, ownership. So, that's a lot more important. But at the end of the day, I just think that the trade's been a big overhang on markets. So once we clear this, it's kind of hard to be bearish.
Unless we don't clear it or it goes south.
Yes, going south would be an adverse development, but we've got to cross our fingers and hope for the best.
Well, it seems unlikely.
Right. Lighthizer's talked about tripwires.
Yeah.
Lighthizer said there's going to be all these tripwires so that if there's any problem that China's going back in this agreement, boom, those tariffs will snap back. So if there is a deal that eventually gets announced, look for what those tripwires are and what happens if China violates the agreement. Are they just going to have more negotiations, or do some of these tariffs come back on if any get taken off, or do they increase that 10% to 25%?